Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Friday. Enjoying the short week. Hopefully, for some of y'all, maybe not everyone. Um, we've got a special guest with us today, who's Dan. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for jumping on with us. And say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's very nice to be on the show today. Thanks for having me on. My name is Dan Nicholson, and I am a recovering people pleaser and lifetime entrepreneur. Um, Most of what I do now and have done for the last 15 years is kind of unlearn what I thought I knew from business school that really teaches you how to work for a Fortune 500 company. So I've had to unlearn some of those things because a lot of the principles and approaches don't apply to small business. And that's what I do for a lot of my clients is help them kind of navigate uh, some misinformation that they get about decision making, and ultimately fund the life that they want faster.
Awesome. So, how hard was it? Retraining your brain. Was it something that you felt like you could do pretty quickly, or did it take years to do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's hard to know in the moment how far away you are from where you want to be because we're subject to so many biases. So if you would have asked me 15 years ago, did I consider myself to be a stoic, reasonable, sort of practical decision maker, I would have said yes. But now when I look in the rearview mirror, I would say there are many gaps in my decision making because I was too focused oftentimes on uh, being a people pleaser or being, if you've ever heard the term, a good child. Good child is like, what are the rules? I just want to be compliant. I'm conflict avoidant. So I'm always trying to get an A on everything that I'm doing. It's like, get that 4.0, even though I'm not in class. It's just that 4.0 in life. And so I don't think I knew it at the time. So I'm almost hesitant to say that I've even made it there yet as of
No,
today, although I'd like to believe I have.
that's fair. What made you jump into the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, growing up, I was kind of a contradiction as a child. I was painfully shy, had a speech problem, which contributed to my my shyness. So on one end, I was very shy. On the other end, I had this almost innate desire to prove myself, and was always scheming on business ideas. I was trying to talk my parents when I was 9 into just to date myself and how old I am, talk them into letting me have a paper route. And I'd run all the numbers on what I thought I could make. And they said, well, wait until you're 13, then you can get a paper route. So when I was 13, like, hey, you guys told me I've been pining away for 4 years, and I ran it like a business. So I was constantly trying to grow my paper route. I did this holiday campaign every year where I made a bunch of handmade cards for all of the people on my route, and I would get an overwhelming for me amount of tips in response to the card. It's like
Hmm.
3 times. It's like a quarter of my annual income would come from these gifts that I would get in response to these handmade cards. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. Uh, Went off in the opposite direction for a while in my career, and so it kind of took me a while to come back to entrepreneurship.
I remember my first job was actually a paper delivery as well. So
Right
I
on.
was just sitting there as you were talking. I'm like, oh, I remember having to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to get the Saturday paper or the Sunday paper. And it was like, why am I doing this? I'm only 13 years old, you know.
Right.
But for me, it was always Christmas time. We always got treated pretty good during Christmas time with the tips and everything. So I think that was the little motivation I had was sticking through Christmas.
Right. Exactly. It's
Um,
kind of a bummer now that that's not really a thing for 12, 13-year-olds to have a paper route. And kind of learned some of the basics of business and responsibility. I think it was a
I
great
it's hard to
experience.
even for jobs, for like even my daughter, she's 17 now, but even when she first wanted to start looking for a job at 16, like a lot of places don't want to hire people under the age of 18. Um,
Mhm.
and it was shocking for me that that was such a case, you know.
It's a different time. I mean, I remember getting the paper route, and then when you get to 15 and a half, 16, you go get a job
Mhm.
I worked at a Safeway grocery store. Still one of my most favorite jobs. There's a lot of pleasure I got from like stocking the shelves and knowing that like something about that, uh, or getting a retail job. And it is significantly harder for teenagers to get those jobs now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because I had a paper route, or not a paper route. Sorry, I meant pizza delivery. So I worked for a pizza delivery. And man, at the time I thought I was making bank. Because all the tips. You get pretty good tips on the pizza routes, and so man, I felt like I was killing it back then. But you just can't get that nowadays. Like even trying to do a Uber, or Uber Eats, it's you got to be 18 and older.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and kind of transition back into like what exactly you do and what you offer your clients and what it takes to do what you do.
Yeah. So I mentioned I went a little sideways for a while in my career away from entrepreneurship. So I got an accounting degree and a information systems degree, just thinking the combination of the two would be the best skill set to be an entrepreneur. Accounting, language of business, technology, and at the start of my senior year, I ended up getting nominated for a fellowship at the board that writes all the U.S. accounting standards. And
Oh,
they asked the top 50 accounting programs to nominate a student, and then 7 end up getting selected for the fellowship. It is essentially the equivalent of finishing law school and clerking for the Supreme Court. So
mm,
that took my career, and I didn't feel like I could say no to that. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. My dad was a journeyman machinist. My mom mostly stayed at home growing up, and then she was a lunch lady. So for me to have this opportunity to go to the most prestigious fellowship, I didn't feel like I could turn that down. I ended up working on arguably if not still the most complicated accounting standard, top 3 most complicated accounting standards in this area of derivatives and hedging
mm,
activities. And so that put me in this path where I was working in capital markets and mostly working with Fortune 500 or really Fortune 50 clients that had $100 billion or more in investable assets. And and I was miserable doing it. So I kept changing jobs over a period of 7 or 8 years, and people kept hiring me. They really shouldn't have, because I should have been self-employed. But yeah, your resume looks good. You got these credentials. So I was job hopping, and then finally I realized, almost 15 years ago now, that there was an opportunity to do something different in the CPA space, where I could take the expertise that I built and scratch the entrepreneurial itch that I have. And that was recognizing that at the time, every CPA firm was charging by the hour, and they were doing very transactional work for small business owners, small to medium sized business owners. So they were doing uh, very transactional work. Let me prepare your taxes. Let me do your books. They weren't doing any of the strategic work that I was accustomed to doing. And so we developed tax planning methodology, a CFO methodology, that's all on a fixed fee basis. And we've been doing that for about 15 years now. We have more competitors. People have come into the space and seen the opportunity, including people on TikTok and Instagram that are
mm.
now tax experts. So it's become an interesting time, but that was kind of my first foray into entrepreneurship.
So so who do you like to work with most? Who's your favorite client?
Yeah, so I describe our client less as a niche and more of in kind of psychographic terms. So I want to work with what I would call a purpose-driven entrepreneur. And when I started using that term years ago, my wife said, "That's the most specific, generic term I've ever heard." It's like, it sounds like a thing, but I have no idea what the thing is. Like, yeah, no, you're right. It is very specific and very generic and broad at the same point. So, uh, and I like to do those types of things because it's an opportunity to create your own definition. So, purpose-driven entrepreneur to me is someone whose business investments exist to serve them and living the life that they want. And so these are all just vehicles to achieving their goals, which is different than what I would call an egocentric entrepreneur who just wants to arbitrarily 10x things. It's like, oh, I just got to get a $100 million business, and then we're gonna, 10x it from there, and then we're gonna, like, well, why? What are you trying to accomplish? It's like, well, I just want to prove it. I just want to prove myself. And like, well, how do you prove yourself exactly? Um, I just want to prove it. And it turns out when you ask someone, how do you know when you've proven it, or how do you know when you're good enough? There's no third party objective board that tells you officially that you're good enough. Only you can answer the question, right? So it becomes this never ending cycle for them where they do one thing, you get to the end of it, not satisfied, feel worse almost because you're like, I thought once I did this, I was going to feel like I made it, but I don't. So now I got to do the next thing, and you're on this constant rat race to prove yourself. And I had a mentor point out when I said that years ago. He said, Dan, you consider yourself to be fairly stoic, but the whole notion of having to prove yourself is the opposite of stoicism. It's Epicurean. It's the ultimate self-indulgence. And those are moments like that are so visceral when you realize like someone is very, it's like, yeah, you're right. I had this whole notion. I've been fueled by proving it. And it's all in my own self-indulgence.
So, so what do you feel like would is like the most important thing for businesses when they're trying to ramp up, that 10x or that, that they're looking for that ramp, what's one of the things that they should be looking for?
Well, first step to me is uh, what are your rules around money? So I've asked this question for the last 15 years to business owners and individuals. What are your rules around money and finance? Because every business decision is a financial decision. So what are your rules? And I get two responses: have as much of it as possible, and then they laugh, which I appreciate. A dad joke. It's kind of a dad joke. So, yeah, have as much as possible. Yeah, cool, that makes sense. Or the deer in headlights. I don't know. The first answer, have as much of it as possible, is not a rule; it's an outcome. And so they're essentially the same answer as the second person, which is, I don't have any rules or any principles. And that's incredibly problematic. Back to my days in the investment world, the difference between the top traders and everyone else was the top traders, they had rules, principles. They understood they were inherently a bias. They're going to get sidetracked by things like loss aversion, ownership bias, mental accounting bias, etc. And so they would design systems, rules, principles to help them overcome those biases so they could make better trades, do better deals. And so it's really difficult to quickly scale your business or reach your goals if you don't have an investment thesis, you don't have a set of principles. So first thing we do is establish what those decision-making frameworks are. Consistency over accuracy is the saying in my business, my world. We need to be consistent. You could be correct, which is accurate, but if you're not consistent in how you make decisions, you're oftentimes creating more problems. So get the rules in place. And then the first rule for all my clients is have a solvable problem. And the solvable problem is our methodology for them to essentially turn their definition of wealth, what they want out of life, into a target that we can calculate and measure. Are you getting closer to funding that or not? Sort of like Google Maps for your finances of
Mhm.
you got a target. Let's measure if we're actually making the right decisions that are getting us there in the timeline that we require. Otherwise, I don't know how to answer most questions someone asks me if I don't know what the target is.
That's good. Yeah, I agree. Target is kind of important to continue mission, right? You know.
Absolutely.
So uh, so what was I guess what was important for you starting out as a small business owner or an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's changed from what I was saying earlier. Primary motivation was proving myself, and um, frankly, because I was this painfully shy kid that didn't know how to make friends, that a lot of the motivation was to prove to the world that I'm capable and competent. So I don't like to admit that, but that's the reality that that's what was fueling me initially. And the consequence of that is I made a lot of short term decisions to try to have quick wins to validate that I was doing a good job. And I kept getting punched in the face, uh, a couple steps forward, one step back, type of stuff. And and I would implement. I develop tools for clients. For example, uh, business owners would come to us and say, "Hey, I really want a financial forecast and budget." Like, okay, well, that's one of my areas of expertise. Let's build that for you. I know how to do that. I went to business school. I worked in these companies. I've done it before. Um, build it. Um, 3 months later or so, we check in. How's it going? They're like, I haven't looked at that since you made it. I'm like, okay. I'm just curious. Did we do a bad job? What? And my tendency when something isn't working is to think, what do I need to do better?
Mm.
What do I need to communicate something better? I miscalculated something. What do I need to do better? And well, they were like, well, what you did was fine, but we just made up the numbers. We don't have any data. It's where we wanted the business to go. It was just a lot of sort of millionaire math, and it's like it looks pretty on a spreadsheet, but by the time it was done, it was no longer valid. So I kept having those conversations, and that's when I realized this thing that fundamentally changed the way that I work with clients, and it's one of the fundamental bases to a book that I wrote called Rigging the Game. And it's that when you go to business school, it doesn't matter what your major is, be accounting, marketing, management, e- ecom. Um, you're learning how to maximize shareholder value. That is the responsibility of the C-suite at a publicly traded company. Is they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. Maximize is have the most, and the most as fast as possible. They're not optimizing. And that's what small business owners have to do is optimize. What is your top one or two goals? And how do we optimize, put all of our resources towards achieving your top one or two goals? So actually all the principles and frameworks and things that I learned in business school are about maximizing shareholder value. They often don't work for a small business owner who's optimizing. The budget, the forecast at a Fortune 500 company, it's built by accountants or by the finance team for the accounting and finance team. So it's built for them, by them, and they support it on an ongoing basis. And they have data to back up the numbers and systems and processes in place. Small business owner does not have the accounting finance team that scale. And so it doesn't become, and they don't have the data. It's not useful. So you got to build a different set of tools for that approach.
Man, that's a great way to look at it. I'm a math guy, so understanding that the formulas and understanding the numbers is important. But what kind of advice do you have for somebody that's wanting to take that jump to become an entrepreneur, but afraid of the numbers or afraid of what they can't achieve?
You mentioned math. Are you familiar with the system reliability concept? That every step in the process that you add that's less than 100% probability of success reduces the overall system reliability. Does that sound familiar to you?
It
Yeah, so
doesn't, but
yeah, let me
yeah.
explain
Uh,
it briefly,
yeah,
and then
go for it, please.
then I'll answer your question. There's this whole adage about fail to plan, plan to fail. I don't know if you heard
Hmm.
that growing up. I had,
Absolutely.
I had a first girlfriend in in high school. Her stepdad. It's like every time I saw him, it's like, Dan, fail to plan, plan to fail, fail to plan. Um, yeah, totally get it. But let's say that we build a 5-step plan, and it's an entirely new business. So we don't have any data. And step one, we think has 100% likelihood of success. It's going to play out the way we expect step one to play out. So 100%, great. Step two, well, it's kind of related to step one, but it might be related to step 3 and 4 and 5. Let's say that it has a 80% probability of success. Well, now the overall reliability of the system is 80%. 100% times 80%. Step 3 might also have an 80% probability of success. Now the reliability of our system is 64%. 100 times 80 times 80. If step 4 has a 50% probability, we're now down to 32% likelihood that this plan plays out the way we expect. And then let's just say that step 5 has a 10% probability. We're now down to 3%. And if we kept adding more steps, we would get down to like a 1% probability that this plan is going to play out the way we want it to. Okay, so that's the concept of system reliability. Every step that we add in that has a lower than 100% reliability reduces the reliability of the system. So how does that have to do with a new business owner and all that? So where people get hung up is that fail to plan, plan to fail. They go into a new business and they're like, I got to know exactly what I'm doing. I got to have a detailed plan. I got to follow that plan. And so I got to come up with an idea, and then I got to come up with how to implement it. And both of those are very overwhelming. And you have no data to know if the idea or the plan is going to be successful. So the first time you get punched in the mouth, things don't work out the way that you want. Most people just give up at that point, right? Or they double down and on the plan, and they assume that effort is the answer. I'm not trying hard enough, or I need to make a bigger bet. But the issue is they don't have any data and they're following a very rigid plan. So there's a better approach. I call it micro steps. This is how I turned my book Reading the Game into a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. It's how I pre-sold over 5,000 copies of the book, having never sold a book before. And it's called micro steps. It's risk. It's an idea around risk. It's what's the smallest step I can take with the least amount of effort and risk to get data that informs the next thing that I'm going to do. So I did a Facebook post in a group. I said, if I were to write a book, here's a rough kind of outline of it. Would you be interested in buying it? I set a rule in advance. And I said, I need at least, I don't remember what it is, but let's just say I need 100 people to respond yes. They said yes. Okay, I got 100 or more people, took the next step. I set up a payment link, going to collect deposits. And so like I need a certain number of people because people vote with their wallet. So they might tell you that they like the idea and they would be interested, but until they pay you, you don't have a client. People trip themselves up on that and they go build something and they come back and no one buys it. And then they go on some shame spiral. So again, I set a target, how many people need to buy. Ultimately, through that process, I sold 5,000 copies roughly in advance, which was my ultimate game there because I knew if I could pre-sell that amount of copies, I would get on the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list, which would increase my credibility, etc. But I didn't even start writing the book. I didn't look for a publisher. I didn't do any of those things because unless I got the data and validated, I wasn't going to do anything else. And so that's the approach that I recommend anytime you do something new is get some data, validate there's interest. Don't go build a website, set up bank accounts, form an LLC, hire a marketing agency, hire an accounting firm, although I'm always willing to, be paid. I'm still a capitalist. But don't go do all that until you validate. Take a step, get information, take the next step, get people's money, etc. And you can have an outline of a plan, but you want to adjust as you get new information.
No, that was great information, and um, for me, it made 100% sense. What you're trying to explain, and I like that. I don't think enough people plan properly, and they just automatically jump into something. And I think a lot of the failures come from that sense. So as we wrap it up, is there any final words that you have, Dan? And also let us know the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me would be two different places. My CPA firm, Nth Degree CPAs, nthDegreeCPAs.com, or wealthtype.com. So I developed this thing called the 5 wealth types: hustlers, gamblers, optimizers, savers, and outsourcers. There's no right or wrong wealth type, but it does indicate how you make financial-based decisions and how you make business decisions. And so I have a free assessment, takes 5 minutes or less that people can take, and then some specific recommendations for you based off your wealth type. So just for example, the hustlers, that type assumes that effort is the solution to solve all their problems. So if they start a business and it's not working out initially, they double down, triple down, etc. on working harder. And that's great. It's a big part of our culture is hard work. And so that's a great characteristic. At the same point, they don't ask themselves, what if it didn't have to be hard? One of the things that most entrepreneurs, they might be good at finding easy money, but they're not great at finding easy money, where you don't have to crush yourself and bet everything. And it's out there. Just need a different system.
And so do you just recommend them to go to your websites if they want to reach out to you?
That would be the best approach.
That'd
Yeah.
be Okay. All right. Great. Well, again, thank you for coming on here, Dan. It was a pleasure. And all the information that you provided was very insightful, at least for me. Hopefully, our audience will be able to take some of that in and gain some useful knowledge from this. We're going to link both of those websites in the description. So feel free to reach out to Dan if you have any questions or anything about what we discussed here. And you can also comment below, and then we can get the message to Dan as well, so that everyone can get a hold of him. Again, thanks for being here. Y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy, the Friday, the short week, and we'll be seeing you again. Okay.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.